Hey, are you ready to turn your podcast into an authority engine and not just more content? Well, welcome to Influential Voices of Authority. This is the podcast for coaches, consultants, and experts who are ready to move from being the best kept secret in their niche to being that recognized, sought after authority in their space. I'm your host, Erik K. Johnson, podcast talent coach and media veteran. On each episode of Influential Voices of Authority, I sit down with industry leaders and visibility experts to uncover how they use their voice, their platform, and their message to grow their influence, to attract the right audience, and more importantly, attract premium clients and opportunities. This is where it all begins. If you're ready to turn your voice into your greatest asset, then you're in the right place. Welcome to Influential Voices of Authority. Today, I have a pretty special episode for you. I've gone back over the interviews that I've done to pull out some of the strongest tips and tricks for you to use. You know, I've had the privilege of interviewing some incredible entrepreneurs and experts and thought leaders over the years. And people often ask me, what's the biggest lesson that you've learned from all of these conversations? And it's interesting because every guest has a different business, a different niche, a different personality, a different way of doing things. But I've noticed the same 6 patterns that appear over and over and over again. They're characteristics that each of these experts have that they use to leverage their podcast to grow their business and attract the right opportunities. And today, I want to share those 6 lessons with you on this episode. If you are looking to use your podcast to grow your authority and your influence in the space and grow your business, this episode is for you. And if one of these really resonate with you, I'll point you back so you can listen to the full episode and you can dive into that interview that I had and you can hear the entire conversation. And I'll show you how to implement these lessons into your own show, into your own strategy, into your own podcast so that you too can attract premium opportunities. It's the same strategies I take all experts through with my podcast Authority Audit. This is the opportunity to have me deep dive your show, your podcast, to find the authority gaps and not only find them, but help you fix them. You can find out all about my podcast Authority Audit over at podcasttalentcoach.com/coaching. That's podcasttalentcoach.com/coaching. All right, let's dive into the 6 lessons. All right. The first lesson comes from my interview with Paul Waterboy Brown. Lesson number 1 is authority begins with mission. People don't follow expertise. They follow purpose. They don't buy what you do. They buy why you do it. Simon Sinek wrote a whole book about it. Start with why. This is where it all begins. People follow purpose. And in my conversation with Paul, he talks about his mission being bigger than himself. It all starts with purpose. And here's a little clip of it.
And the lesson there, Erik, is both of those divine appointments, those messages, those huge life-altering whys and hows, if you will, they came in the normal course of doing business.
Yeah.
So for you and anybody listening, if you don't know exactly what to do or you don't have this like super clear life purpose yet, that's okay. Martin Luther King Jr. said faith is taking the first step without being able to see the whole staircase. So you keep taking the action in business and in your life, and sometimes the purpose and the explanation meets you along the way, and that's what happened in both of these things.
You see, people don't follow just anybody. People don't become authorities because they want attention. They become authorities because they're obsessed with solving a problem. They have a mission bigger than themselves. If you want people to follow your message, you need to start with your purpose. You need to start with your mission. The most influential people aren't out chasing followers. They're chasing a cause. And authority is the byproduct of that purpose. So whatever it is you're doing in whatever space you're operating in, make sure you have that strong purpose. If you want to hear how one mission turned into a movement, head over and listen to my full conversation with Paul Brown. It's on episode 573. You can find it in the show notes. You can just find it right there on your podcast player. Make sure you subscribe to the show. That way you can get all of the episodes. And I would be truly grateful to you for subscribing to this podcast and helping me grow the show. All right. Lesson number 2 is your voice scales your expertise. It helps you get bigger and make a bigger impact. This came from my conversation with Dr. Keyvan Eghbali. He had the realization that helping one patient at a time wasn't nearly enough. His goal was to impact 10 million lives. And so in order to do that, Dr. Eghbali had to expand beyond the walls of his clinic and find ways to reach so many more people. Here's a little clip of that interview.
Those of us in the health and wellness field, obviously that's what we do. That's what we learn day in and day out. We read the studies. We want to share as much as we can with individuals. So it was basically a combination of losing dear friends to these preventable causes at young ages, in their 60s, one in his 50s, and just deciding that one-on-one in an office setting was great while I did it for over 20 plus years. But I wanted to do more. I wanted to impact more lives, which is why I went into coaching, group coaching, corporate wellness speaking, and obviously the podcast to be able to now reach more and more people literally with every single passing month as the podcast grows and as the followers increase.
You see, your calendar limits your expertise. Your practice, the walls of your office limit your impact. Your authority, when you focus on building authority, that removes that ceiling, that removes that cap on how many people you can affect and impact. Your expertise, if you just rely on expertise alone, that changes one person at a time. But your voice can change thousands when you lean into it and you leverage it in the right way. Podcasting, speaking, a content creation allows your expertise to work while you're asleep. And you can reach so many more people and make such a bigger impact. You can take that purpose that we just learned about and now amplify it with your voice. If you'd like to hear how Dr. Eghbali did it, how he's out to save 10 million lives, head over and listen to my interview with him in episode 574. Again, you can find that right there in your podcast player. All right, lesson 3 comes from my conversation with Adam Roach. Lesson number 3 is implementation creates transformation. It's not information alone that creates the transformation. It's the implementation of that information. If you want to stand apart and you want to battle AI in your niche, you need to help people implement. Your audience doesn't need more information. Here's a little clip from my conversation with Adam Roach.
That word is so unique because I don't believe we're in an information age anymore. Right? I think that world has passed us. That was 10 years ago. Where we look at where we are, because information is everywhere now. We're in an implementation age, I believe. And so that word authority is an interesting word because there's so much information out there.
You see, facts educate, but stories transform. Stories transform by showing people what's possible. Magnetic leaders don't just talk about what they do. They tell the stories that make others believe it's possible for them. Authorities don't simply teach, they illustrate. Information alone teaches. Stories move people toward implementation. That's why stories help you create your authority. I mean, how many stories are you telling in your podcast? And I mean true stories, not just minimal anecdotes, but stories that have some tension and some climax and a resolution. The art of storytelling is lost today. And when you stop leaning into your content and start leaning into context with story wrapped around your content, that's how you make real impact in the world. That's how you help people implement. If you want to hear how Adam Roach is moving his podcast and his coaching business to the implementation age, check out my conversation with him. You can find that interview in episode 572. All right, so we started with your purpose. We're amplifying your voice with your persona, right? Your voice. We're amplifying your message through your voice and impacting thousands and not just one at a time. So your purpose, and then your persona and your voice. And then next was your parables. Those are your stories. So you're infusing your content with your stories. And that takes us to lesson 4. And lesson 4 is all about relationships. Relationships accelerate authority. If you want to really pour gas on the fire and make it spread, use relationships. We got deep into this during my conversation with Kristen Nolan. Kristen, she talks all about how getting on other podcasts helps you impact even more people. When you can get in front of the right audience with the right message at the right time, you can start to grow. And it all comes by being on the right platforms. Here's a little bit of my conversation with Kristen Nolan.
And
Perfect.
so what we did is he gave me Speakers Bureau websites. I was able to take those websites, put it into one of our databases, and I was able to see what podcasts the people that visited that website listened to. So I could then target
Wow.
and put him in front of his ideal audience based on that. So he was getting in front of the exact people that he wanted to. It wasn't guessing. So we were able to position his book and position him as a keynote speaker in front of the perfect audience.
You see, lesson 4 is all about your platform, not your platform alone, but other platforms as well. You don't need a big audience. You need the right audience. You need to be in front of the right people at the right time with the right message. That's borrowed trust. When you can leverage other platforms, you borrow their trust that they've already created with the audience. It gives you authority. You're stepping into authority rather than creating it from scratch. You're finding strategic partnerships, partners who already have the attention of your ideal client, the people you're trying to reach. And you can do that through podcast guesting. You can do it through books and summits, stages, live events. Find places where your ideal audience is congregating. Make a partnership with the person that owns that stage so they can place you in front of that audience and you leverage borrowed trust. Because authority compounds through relationships. When you let every relationship lead to 2 more, 2 relationships become 4, 4 relationships become 8, 8 becomes 16, 16 becomes 32, and it starts to compound. That flywheel starts to spin. You see, most people are chasing reach. Authorities chase relevance. They're getting in the right rooms at the right time. You can discover how to leverage borrowed trust when you listen to my conversation with Kristen Nolan. You can find that in episode 559. Again, you can find that in your podcast player. I have the link in the show notes as well. So we've talked about your purpose. We've talked about your persona. We've talked about your parables, the stories that you wrap around it. Now we're getting out and spreading it. So we've talked about your platforms. And the next piece is building it through relationships. All right. Podcasts build relationships. It builds when you sprinkle your personality and you share yourself in your show, your audience starts to get to know, like, and trust you, right? You let your personality shine. You stop relying just on content alone and you start letting people get to know who you are, what you value, what you believe in, how you operate. And when you do that, you start to build relationships. We talked all about building relationships and using it to grow your business. When I interviewed Dr. Paul Etchison, the interview was incredibly powerful. This is, if you're going to listen to one interview, I highly recommend you listen to this one, because when your audience builds relationships with you, they begin to trust you. That trust begins to build. That's rapport. 4 steps in the sales process. They are building rapport, qualifying your audience, educating them on your solution, and closing the sale. And not all 4 are equal. In fact, building rapport is 40% of the sales process. I need to get to like you. You need to get to like me. We need to feel like we're compatible. Then the next 30% is qualifying your prospect, make sure they're right for you and you're right for them. And I need to make sure that what I have to offer can solve your problems. You need to make sure what I have to offer really understands your problem and can solve it as well. If you structure your podcast properly, it builds rapport and qualifies your audience. It does 70% of the sales process, so that when your audience shows up, they don't say, should I work with you? They say, how can I work with you? Because you don't need to build rapport on the sales call. You've already built the rapport through your podcast. And Dr. Paul does that in his show. Here's a little clip from my conversation with Dr. Paul Etchison.
So before working with you, revenue was about a little bit over $200,000. I am just under the cusp of $1 million a year in revenue, just doing coaching. So my God, like I don't need to do anything else. This is more than enough, and it's so damn fulfilling. And it takes so much less time than my normal 9 to 5 of being a dentist that I used to do. So it's wins in every regard. It's like falling in love with your work, finding something you can be passionate about, and get. It's amazing that people will pay me for it. How will people pay me just to tell them what I already know? It's unbelievable. But I mean, that's the beauty of the podcast. That's what comes from the podcast.
You see, now what I need you to understand here is that people rarely become clients because they listen to episode 147. Just listening to the episode alone isn't going to turn them into clients. They become clients because your content consistently answers one question, and that's, why should I trust you? Why you and not somebody else? If you're offering widgets, why am I going to buy the widget from you rather than every other widget seller? And it's because I have rapport with you. I like who you are. I trust who you are. And when you create content just based on information, it doesn't build that rapport. You have to tell your story. You have to let people understand you. And trust builds through every episode. It builds on each other, episode after episode after episode. And you start to demonstrate your expertise, and you start creating clarity in your listeners of exactly how you help your clients succeed. They understand what you value and what you believe in and how you operate. And that's where trust starts to build. You really need to listen and hear how Paul filled his mastermind using his podcast. It generated hundreds of thousands of dollars for him by doing it. You can find it. He tells his story over in episode 564. Now, I'm not saying you're going to generate hundreds of thousands of dollars, because I don't know you. I don't know your abilities. I don't know how hard you're willing to work. I don't even know what you offer. What I am telling you is you can go see how one man did it, and you can see how it's possible for you to build a successful business using your podcast, using the same methodology that Dr. Paul uses, by putting his personality into his episode after episode. And that takes us to lesson 6. And lesson 6 is authority is engineered. It's not accidental. You can engineer authority methodically. Authority is something that you become. Authority is something that you step into. It doesn't happen by accident. You have to do it on purpose. Each of the 5 experts that I just showed you stepped into their authority in their own way. And they do it systematically through the 6 steps. And that 6th step, we started with step 1 is your purpose, 2 is your persona, 3 is your parables. We build that foundation. Step 4 is platforms. Step 5 is personality. And step 6 is your positioning. How do you position yourself as a category of 1? You're not trying to be the best in your category. You are a category of 1. Nobody can compare to you because the way you do it and who you are. AI can't copy a category of 1. And each of the 5 experts I just showed you do it in their own way. They do it systematically through these 5 steps. Paul Brown started with purpose. He found his calling and he stepped into his authority.
About then, I just felt this very distinct but inaudible voice that I interpret was God speaking, saying, Paul, you're going to take care of this water problem in this generation. And I had 4 thoughts at once. You want to hear them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. The first one was, God, I don't have the network or net worth for that.
Yeah.
Second was, but if you're calling me, that's not really my problem. So, yes, sir. The third one was the feeling that it was already done. I just needed to walk into it. I didn't understand the significance of walk yet. And the fourth one was, I already knew, Erik, that no good or lasting thing is done by a person. You know, it's like that African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with a team. I
Yeah.
already knew it takes a team, or in this case, teams of teams. But there was still this weight and responsibility of the power of one person stepping up and accepting a call.
Dr. Eghbali took his clinical expertise and expanded that impact to the world through his huge mission and purpose. But more than that, he understood his persona, what his personal brand stood for. And he knew if he spread his personal brand beyond his clinic and he started sharing his voice to the world with that clearly identified persona, that he could make a far bigger impact than he could doing it just in his clinic.
So I decided that I don't want to deal with those individuals anymore, and I didn't want to deal with another super bill or another insurance company. And that's when I really thought, okay, it's really time to get into serving the masses, serving the larger population. Recently, I recorded a talk as a corporate wellness speaker where my talk, and literally I just used my knowledge that I've gained over 30 years in healthcare, and I talked about work balance, life-work balance. And frankly, that talk was recorded and is now available to 300,000 plus employees of this one corporation. However, would I be able to serve that many people one-on-one in a private practice? I felt I served my community for over 20 years, and now it's time for the second chapter of my life personally to leave a bigger legacy to impact and save as many lives as I possibly can. And honestly, 10 million is just the beginning.
And then Adam Roach builds his authority through his parables, all of the stories that he tells on his show. It's not about your content, it's about your context.
Right. Well, we'll tell the stories on where I made the mistakes. We'll tell the stories on where we've had success. Jess also coaches, so she has her own brand. It's called Big Ideas Made Simple. And so we will step into, and simply just from storytelling time, tell where we made mistakes, tell where we had successes, tell our journey through those processes. And boy, I almost feel like sometimes, Erik, I have more failures than I do successes. But hey, I think that's all part of the game, right?
Kristen Nolan shared the power of the platform with us and how to leverage borrowed trust to effectively and methodically engineer your authority.
One of the big things is that you automatically have the host support, right? So the host has an audience that they've curated. And so by them choosing you to be a guest, that means that they've vetted you. That means that you automatically have that authority to be on their podcast. So I think it's really critical that, you kind of know that going in. So when my clients come to me and they're, as we mentioned before, they're a little, shaky or, maybe less confident. I often remind them of that, right? So you have that authority to show up, and you have, the ability to share what you have to offer the audience. And so I think, really just having that, confidence to show up is really important.
And finally, Dr. Paul Etchison, he uses his podcast to build rapport and qualify his prospects before he ever makes an offer. They become warm leads. And by the time they show up to a sales conversation with him, whether it's on his strategy call or a webinar or some other opportunity to discuss business, they show up not asking, should I work with you? But they show up asking, how do I work with you? And this positioning moves Dr. Paul into a category of one.
Through the podcast, you demonstrate your knowledge. You get to show your personality. Customers and clients feel like they connect with you. They feel like they already know you. Podcasting is essentially the only way I get new clients, I think. I suppose I get some from word of mouth, but more or less that's the only way that my new clients are discovering me and finding out about what I offer. And it is the primary lead flow. And what's interesting is I talk to some people about, I sign up clients for coaching, and to some extent there is a skill in the strategy call, in the interview. And it's one of those things when I talk to these people and they go through my calls, they're like, oh, these are all warm leads. Every single lead that comes through is essentially a warm lead because it comes through the podcast, which is a completely different lead. I have had cold leads from when I spoke at some different things, but it's a different lead. So it's the backbone of everything I'm doing.
You see, every guest had different strategies. They had different personalities. They had different businesses, but every one of them became known for consistently solving one important problem, and they methodically engineered their authority on purpose. Authority isn't built overnight. It's engineered step by step and methodically. It's why I call my framework authority engineering. It's those 6 steps done in order in a methodical way. Each one of these experts leans into a different element of authority engineering, but all 6 elements are present in what they do. Purpose, persona, parables, then your platform, your personality, and your positioning. It's a methodical way that you can engineer authority and profits. You walk through it step by step. But did you notice one thing? None of these experts talked about their downloads. How many downloads do they have? They didn't talk about creating viral videos. They didn't talk about chasing followers. How do I grow my audience? They didn't talk about any of that. They didn't want a big audience. They wanted the right audience. Instead of talking about chasing the algorithms and trying to manipulate the system, they talked about mission, purpose, stories, parables, relationships, platforms, community, personality, consistency, positioning. That's authority. And that's why my podcast authority audit is your next natural step. Because somewhere in your show, as you're using it to grow your authority in your niche and you're using it to amplify your voice and grow your business, something's missing. There's a gap there somewhere. Listening to all of these interviews is inspiring. But like Adam Roach said, information alone won't create the transformation. It's the implementation that does. Applying these lessons is transformational when you implement what you've just learned. And that's exactly why I created my podcast authority audit. I've spent hundreds of hours, maybe even thousands of hours working with hosts, radio hosts since 1995, podcast hosts since 2012. And I've listened to so many shows that I can tell you exactly where your authority is leaking. The patterns behind successful authority builders are evident when you've listened to the number of shows I've listened to. And I can apply that knowledge and expertise to your show and quickly point out exactly where your gaps exist. The podcast authority audit is where I apply these same patterns to your show. When I listen to your podcast, I'm looking for these exact 6 elements. Do you have a mission that people can rally around? Is your purpose clear and clearly identified? Does your message position you as the obvious authority in your niche? Do you have a persona that's clearly defined? Are you telling stories that people remember? Are you teaching through parables? Because people don't want to learn. They want to be entertained. Is your podcast building relationships? Are you using the right platforms to get in front of the right people at the right time? Are you sprinkling your personality in there so people get to know, like, and trust you? And is every episode intentionally moving listeners toward working with you? That's what the Podcast Authority Audit is all here to uncover. Because what I've discovered after interviewing so many successful entrepreneurs is that authority is not accidental. It's engineered intentionally. And once you know what to look for, everything about your podcast changes. Let me help you do that. Head over to podcasttalentcoach.com/coaching. You can get all the information right there about your podcast authority audit. Let's find the gaps in your show. podcasttalentcoach.com/coaching. There's a video right there on the homepage that will tell you exactly what is included in the Podcast Authority Audit and how it can drastically change your show. Again, that's podcasttalentcoach.com/coaching. You know, over the past few years, I've interviewed some incredibly successful and amazing entrepreneurs. They have different businesses, they have different personalities, they're in different industries, but all 6 of these characteristics are evident in their show. They all share these same 6 characteristics if they're successful. And here's the interesting part. These are the exact 6 things that I evaluate in the Podcast Authority Audit. I'm listening for your mission, your clarity, your stories, your positioning, your relationships, how you're using your platform. And whether your podcast is intentionally building authority or is it just simply publishing content, we're going to discover that as well. Because content fills your RSS feed. Authority fills your calendar. And if you want more strategy calls, if you want more sales conversations, let me figure out where your authority is leaking. Head over to podcasttalentcoach.com/coaching. Get your podcast authority audit right there. I can't wait to work with you. Thanks for being here again this week. I can't wait to bring you another amazing interview and conversation again next week here on the show. Thanks for listening to Influential Voices of Authority. Step into your authority, and we'll see you next time.